thank you all for joining. We are continuing to be virtual with the Derby City Agile meetup. I know there was just some discussion about, things getting a little bit back to normal, people going into offices, people seeing faces out for lunch meetings and all that good stuff. So maybe we'll think about in the near future doing one in person, but for right now, we're still rocking and rolling virtually. We'd like to thank all of you for joining from not only Louisville, Kentucky, but all over the world. Our outreach since, the pandemic has grown, and we greatly appreciate that. Always feel free to invite your fellow coworkers, your friends to join our group. We try to put on one event each month. And I would like to hand it over to Anna Kepshire. She's going to be introducing our speaker today. So she is the co-org and co-sponsor with myself, Data and Kep Training. So Anna, take it away.
Thank you, Jay. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for being here. I see so many familiar faces, and I always appreciate the support. And speaking for us is Rick Mook. Rick is a Scrum leader at NoiseAware, and he spent several years at Genscape really building their Agile culture. He's an Agile leader, he's an Agilist, and he is a trainer for KEP training and a coach. And I'm really, really strict on who works for me because I want the very best for my clients. And when I met Rick, I knew it was a home run. I don't think I've met as many people as passionate about Rick. He is a true rock star. Everybody loves him. And I'm so excited that he gets to be our speaker. Yay, Rick! So with no more intro, I'm gonna let it go straight to Rick. So thank you. Right. I get very excited, especially with my team members.
Gosh, Anna. Okay, now I have to live up to the hype. Hello, everyone. Good to see some faces and some familiar and some unfamiliar. Great to meet new people. I hope to see all of you at some point in the future. So Rick Mook, hello. I'm here today to talk you through some of the lessons learned and strategies that we've devised, my teams and I, over the last 4 or 5 years. Around big data and data intelligence and machine learning projects involving data. So a little bit what got me to this, so you can place this insights in context, right? Because some of you probably have a lot of experience with these things also. So I'm currently the Scrum leader for a little IoT startup. We monitor noise in short-term rental units, and then we tell the guests to be quiet when they get too noisy. Believe it or not, that's a really big problem for property managers and property owners in the short-term rental space, because if you get too many noise complaints, you can get banned. And then you have a property that you cannot rent, which is a huge problem. So we do a lot of work to preserve reputations and livelihoods in the short-term rental space. And it's a really fun little company, about 40 people and growing very quickly. Just got Series A funding and are driving hard and so far successfully towards Series B. Prior to that, I was with another little company called Genscape that has sensors on all of the energy infrastructure you'd ever want to think about, and pulls in those data and generates intelligence based on those data, creates reports, sends those to traders, sends alerts to traders, all kinds of cool future prediction things. And that company got swallowed up by a big company that I then decided to leave. Prior to that, I was an Agile coach at a little consumer experience startup lab within Humana. So it's kind of been the trajectory. And I've been in the IoT groove for, 4+ years now, I think. So along the way, we run into lots of projects involving data and all the kinds of things that one would typically do with data. Sometimes you need to clean it to make it more useful. You say, gosh, we've got all these CD-ROMs from the US government containing imports and exports. How can we tidy this up? Maybe there's a way to get some dollars out of this stuff, this stack of CDs. Maybe there's a particular analytic question that we want to answer. Maybe we think there's value in there somewhere. We're not really sure what the question is. We're not really sure what the answers might look like, but we think there's dollars somewhere. There's got to be money in this data somewhere. So let's go find it. All of these projects have certain kind of characters, human characters and roles and funky attributes that we need to navigate that are maybe a little different from building, for example, a mobile app or a web application that some consumers, or even a B2B context, or building an API suite. They're a little bit different. They're a kind apart. So that's what today's presentation is about, is some of the things that specifically relate to these data or data intelligence projects. Okay, so I want to introduce you to a hopefully not entirely unfamiliar scenario for those of you who've been through these kinds of projects before. And to do that, I'm going to move aside the PowerPoint and introduce you to some friends of mine here on the Miro board. Can you all see these friends of mine? Okay. So here in this little box, we have the data, and somebody's looked at this and said, oh my gosh, there's got to be money here. We want to do something with this, right? Usually not too far away from the data is this character called the SME. This is the subject matter expert. This is the person who actually knows what the data mean, right? They know that that column header AC359 is actually the patient's first name or whatever, right? But that's not usually the person who's trying to extract the value from the data. The poor schmuck who's trying to extract the value is this person called the data scientist. And they're sniffing, sometimes they're the same person, and that's great, but usually not. So you have this poor data scientist who's sniffing around the data and trying to get access to it, trying to figure out what the heck it means. So what do? They schedule a meeting. And they have a whole bunch of meetings, and then maybe they even collaborate a little bit. They start to get some traction. Meanwhile, there's this giant glowing eyeball called management over there. It's wondering, when am I going to get my stuff? You said money. When do I get money? Right? When do we release? When do we go to production? So they're already asking that. So let's pretend, for example, that this goes reasonably well. Your data scientist actually gets access to the data. I've seen that take upwards of 6 months, but let's presume it goes well. And we get access, we start working in what? An Excel spreadsheet. Why? Because that's what we do. So we're working in an Excel spreadsheet, maybe Tableau, maybe Power BI, something like that. We're starting to see patterns, patterns in the data. And pretty soon the data scientist says, okay, this is good, this is ready. So what do they do then? Well, they call their friend the engineer, who's in lower Earth orbit somewhere doing something, right? Gets pulled down out of lower Earth orbit to work on deploying this stuff. There are some ETLs that need setting up so we can move data around. We need to be able to park the results in a table somewhere. Well, let's presume that goes relatively well. Let's presume that it is in fact possible for the engineer to build the plumbing that data scientist needs in order for the model to run. Well, then we have a whole other set of problems. Now we've got ops, the cowboy over here, right? Ops does what ops wants. And ops is being asked to deploy this thing. Ops takes one look at this dog's breakfast and says, holy crow, there's no way we're putting this into production. So, but let's presume that goes really well. We've probably got some kind of release calendar we got to get on, some kind of schedule thing that we got to do, right? So meanwhile, management is literally pulling out its eyelashes because all they want is their money, right? This is how these things typically go in my albeit limited experience, right? If you let nature take its course, that's what you wind up with. And it sucks. So what today's presentation is about is some tips and tricks that we've developed for avoiding that scenario, for avoiding this giant mess. All right, so let's go down a little bit on Miro here. And oh, look, there's a set of principles. I'm going to pull these up. Now, those of you who've been through Chet's class are going to look at these And you're going to hear and see echoes of Chet, like the ghost of Chet, ooh, or the ghost of Agile in these principles, right? Focus on customer value. What a concept. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means in a minute. Set clear, valuable goals. Use a cross-functional team. Design for quality. And lastly, hypotheses and experiments are units of work. Okay, so let's dig into these a little bitty bit. Data scientist probably has some idea, a vague concept of what they're trying to create or extract from the data that might be valuable. But it's probably not refined. It's probably not tailored to exactly what the customer needs. And this is where Agile comes in really handy, because we can look at that and say, well, what we need to do is create a feedback loop, right? We need to try something, see how the customer responds to it, learn from that attempt, and then iterate, okay? So in order to make that work, you have to have somebody, usually, who's going to be kind of the interface, the customer interface for the team or for the developer. And so what you really need is an additional character that's not currently on the board. You need a product owner. So let's go ahead and make that product owner. Okay, I'll give it the flexi arm. So there's our PO. All right, we're gonna go ahead and pair this developer up with someone from product. Product's job is going to be to really focus on that value. They're going to get in there and say, hey, look, this is why the customer is going to need this information. This is how often they're going to need this information. This is the format they want that information in. They're going to want this column first and that column second, because that's the industry standard. Those kinds of things that your data scientist just isn't going to know, right? The PO is going to go in and do a deep dive. And they're going to communicate that value to the team. Ideally, they're going to be able to quantify it. And it's really critical that in the midst of all this, you keep these folks dedicated. You only want them doing one project at a time. I know that sounds like a waste. We'll talk in a little bit about why it's not. If you don't have product in the mix, here are some patterns or behaviors that I have observed. Jason might have observed them as well. You'll see competing demands, creating wasteful delays and context shifting, right? You're going to see digression, people going off in blind alleys, and infrequent delivery. And lastly, you're going to see stakeholder restlessness and mistrust, because there's nobody going back to the stakeholders and helping them understand what the team's doing. So focusing on customer value, getting that product owner engaged, that's step one. Gotta have it. Step two, this part is at once very hard and very, very simple. Set clear, valuable goals. What does this mean? This means that your team starts with a definition of done. This project will be complete when, number. It has to be a quantifiable outcome. When our model predicts the flow of oil 80% of the time, when our model matches the benchmark by, R squared is whatever, right? You've got to quantify it. What that does is make it objective. When the team does that and hits that good enough mark, they're just done. They're objectively done. There's no argument. There's no negotiation with the stakeholders about how good it has to be. It's just plain done with capital D. So defining that up front is critical. And guess what? We're going back to principle number one here. You can't do that without a product owner on board, because that's what product is really, really good at. They're good at figuring out how good is good enough and what done really means. Okay. Not only that, not only for the project, but also for the iteration, you need a good, valuable goal. So every 2 weeks, if it's a 2-week sprint, or 3 weeks, if it's a 3-week sprint, we're going to deliver a clear, valuable goal, a thing that actually does something for somebody. It might be manual, it might be partial, it might be incomplete, but it delivers something for somebody. And the last thing I'd say here around clear, valuable goals is factor your technical challenges into that. So I like to build a technical risk backlog for data science projects, and you list out all those risks, and then you take the biggest ones and you knock them out early. If you're worried about connecting to Hadoop, do it sprint 1. Get it done, get it out of the way. That way it won't come back to bite you later. All right. If you don't do that, if you don't set clear, valuable goals, here are some of the problems that I've observed. You're going to see scope creep. Your stakeholders will come back to you and ask for it to be better at the end. And you'll have to redo it. And it will spiral and continue longer than it needs to. You will see, likely, overworking of the model to an unnecessarily high standard. I once had a developer working on a data science project. Jason, we're not naming any names, for, what was it, 2 years? Trying to get this coefficient down to less than 2% difference from the benchmark, when in fact we only needed it to be like, within 5, right? So this person burned all that salary, all that effort, all that frustration, all that deferred value, because we could have had this thing out there in the wild a year earlier if we just said we were done, right? But nobody told this person. Nobody told them, hey, it's okay. So you've got to have that clear, valuable goal. All right. Third, and I'm already driving for this, it's already implicit here. Use a cross-functional team. Get the engineer, get him over there with the data scientist. Get the ops person, get him over there. Management, sure, call him a BA, get him on the team. Right? Get that cross-functional team together. Where we go one, we go all. Get them allocated. Get the funding there. Get the commitment. You want all those core capabilities on the team. That comes straight out of Scrum. It comes straight out of Agile. And what this does is recognize that this is not a linear process. This is an iterative process. So in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever, that team is going to release, even in its first iteration, a working something that delivers value. Maybe it's only in the development environment. Maybe it only uses 1/10 of the data. Maybe the algorithm is super scrappy, right? It's just like some lines of our code that somebody whipped up. But the point is it works. And it's running on a machine somewhere. And it's spitting out outputs. And it's getting you insights. Those insights might not be terribly valuable yet, but they are potentially valuable, potentially releasable. So I know that's not the way most of your projects typically work. Most of you probably have like, wait, you don't need one of my ops people. You're not ready to deploy yet. You don't have anything to deploy. Why would I give you an ops person, right? So there's a little bit of a trust relationship that you got to build within your organization. Yes, I know we don't have anything yet, but believe it or not, in 2 weeks we will. And we want it to work with what that person's able to do. So we really need them in the conversation right now so that they can start building out the box. Those are the kinds of conversations that you might find yourself needing to have to get that team pulled together. Another critical one. It's not the data scientist's problem. It's the team's problem, right? If there's an issue that comes up during this project, the team owns the work, the team owns the project, and they support each other. So if you want, not to shamelessly self-promote for my clan here, but if you want, you could add a Scrum leader to this cross-functional team, and it'll probably go a whole lot better, right? But you want that team cohesion, team identity. If you can, get a coach in there with them, and it'll help. If you don't do this, if you don't give yourself a cross-functional team, if you choose to do a 3-legged race with only one leg, it's going to get really weird really fast. You're going to see your data scientist waiting for help that never arrives. How many of you have ever waited for help that never arrived at a company, right? It's going to happen. Nothing will get done because the data aren't even available. I've seen that happen, 6 months. I'm not exaggerating. The data scientist sat there for 6 months waiting for access to the server. Or something gets done, but must be redone when it gets to another step, right? So we built the model, that's great, but now we got to re-engineer the whole thing with the engineer in the mix. Or, yeah, this is great, but we don't deploy that platform, it's not secure. Or we don't deploy that tool. That tool isn't approved by legal. So you're going to have to go and redo it in this whole other tool, right? That's another thing that will happen. So avoid the problems, use a cross-functional team. All right, design for quality. What do I mean by that? That means that that team that's building their thing in that first sprint is already thinking ahead about the data lifecycle at the end. They're thinking, where are the data coming from? What pipeline are they using to get to whatever we're going to do? And then where do they need to get stored at the other side of it? And then how are they going to show up in a report or the UI? Or how's that going to get generated, right? They've thought through the whole data lifecycle, and they've got a basic design in hand that's ready to go at scale. All too often, you'll see somebody do something in an Excel spreadsheet, right? And they've in doing that, they've taken all these shortcuts with where the inputs are and where the outputs are. And so then we have this huge challenge of trying to get that integrated into the platform. So my advice is start with the platform in mind when you're building, and have a sense of how you're going to get to the end state. If you don't do that, you're going to wind up with several things. You're going to wind up with wasteful rework, productionizing things, right? You're going to have to reconcile incompatible tools and incompatible parts of your platform. You're going to have, all of a sudden at the very end, creation of CI/CD. Versioning is suddenly going to become a really big problem. You may find that you don't have all of the tools that you need to test and to configure your model. Your stakeholders might come back later and say, hey, this worked great 3 months ago, but now the parameter variables have changed. We need to go in there and put in new coefficients so that the model will work, because now people buy 2.8 widgets a week instead of 3.2 widgets per week. Can you go in and change that for us? Oh God, yeah, okay. Well, 3 weeks later, it still isn't done and people are getting angry at each other. And if we'd just known, we could have created a tool for that. Well, this is why. This is why you got to design for quality, got to design with the end state in mind. All right, lastly, this is maybe the biggest insight here, perhaps, and it's the most specific to data science. Hypotheses and experiments are units of work. Data scientists are very much in their best state. They're very much scientists. They look at a challenge, they look at a question, and they think about ways to resolve that question or to deepen it or to explore it. And they're going to design an experiment to test a hypothesis. If I build a machine learning model that does X, Y, and Z, it will perform better than one that does A, B, and C. Right? Typical A/B comparison. Look at the results. That has value. That's inquiry. That knowledge is valuable. And I run into this all the time where data scientists ask me, how do I track my work? You know, what do I use? Trello? Do I use Jira? How do I track this stuff? And in a way, it sounds like a bookkeeping question. It's actually a really profound question. What they're really asking is, why does any of this matter? How do I communicate the value of what I'm doing to my stakeholders? And my advice is, every hypothesis that you test should be an item in Jira. Every experiment that you run should be in Jira. Maybe you have your hypothesis is an epic and the experiments that you run are like little stories. or tasks within that epic. You can do it that way. But what that does is it shows progress. In the last month, this team has tested 8 hypotheses with 17 experiments. And here are the results. And they're documented in our Confluence page, for example. And I'm Atlassian in an Atlassian context, so I'm using that, but it could be Google Docs, it could be, whatever JetBrains tool you're using, TFS, any of those. It's the same thing. The point is that the hypothesis and the experiment are the unit of work. You can then go ahead and radiate those results out to stakeholders. That might be within a data science center practice. It could be in a meetup like this one. It could be across your industry. It could be on Medium. I don't know. Publish it in a journal somewhere. But the point is, take that experience, that learning, and then broadcast it. If you don't do this, you're going to see a couple of things emerge. One is that your knowledge is going to stay bottled up in the individual or the team, which is unfortunate. It means that other people are going to have to go and stumble over the same rocks. Second, progress is going to seem really slow and vague. Think about the difference. Hey, James, how's that data science project coming along? When can we expect release? And James says, well, they're working really hard. I don't know. Versus James says, well, they're working really hard. We've tested, 12 hypotheses with 17 experiments this month. We have 8 more hypotheses that we want to test. Some of those are a little bit bigger. So we're expecting to finish up this quarter. Right? One has structure, the other doesn't. So if you don't want to seem vague, get your data scientists to start thinking in terms of hypotheses and experiments. And the third thing is digressions. If you're being intentional about your hypotheses, those hypotheses should be linked to value and to the definition of done for the project, right? If you don't have a hypothesis structure in place, people are going to go off and wind up working on something that may be only partially related, or that might be a little too nitty gritty, or not really useful, not driven by value, right? So again, this connects back to the first principle. Have those hypotheses and experiments on the board. All right, that's kind of the meat and potatoes of what I brought for you today. And I've also got it here in kind of a linear PowerPoint form for those of you who are more PowerPoint minded. Things are kind of laid out there. Do the things on the left to avoid the things on the right. I'll try to distribute this through Jay and Anna and the organizers of the meetup. But y'all can take this and try it out, see if it works for you. If it does, great, congratulations. If it doesn't work, or you find something even better, I really hope you'll let me know so that, again, we can avoid tripping over the same rocks and encountering the same problems over and over again.
Yeah. So Rick, greatly appreciate it. We do have a chat if you want to drop any questions in there. I think we got some time for Rick to hang out, regarding this, or Rick's great background, or anything you want to chat about there. So I think one question that popped to mind, and it's not I don't think it's much of a process question there, but you had mentioned so you had a year where there was an issue trying to get I guess to a perfect point. How do you go about setting certain thresholds when it comes to definition of done? Is that case by case, or I mean, because it seems like that could be a choppy situation, but we do see that a lot where that last 10% is 90%. So is there any sort of recommendation there on what's good enough, or is that just sort of a case by case?
I think it's largely a matter of finding the right person who can give a real answer that's grounded in customer expertise. I've been really lucky in that regard because a lot of the SMEs and product folks I've worked with have been on the customer side and know and understand and feel the pain and can make a call. They can say, yeah, if it's within 3%, I'm happy. I, as a customer, am happy. If it's more than 3%, I'm going to see a problem. You want to find that person. If you can't find that person, don't start the project, for God's sake. Like, get the stakeholders in a room and do a workshop. Get a focus group of customers together. Do some rapid iteration with them. Show them fake data and ask them to evaluate it. Like, would you use this? Why not? Do the product, the lean startup product navigation and refining thing, right? To pull that hypothesis that you have back in towards the place of certainty and complexity that we can manage. Because if you really can't put a number on it, it's still too far out in the land of chaos. And so what we've got to do is pull it back in towards an area of certainty where we can put a team on it and they can drive to a direction. Does that help?
It does. I think it's just emphasizing to be really clear up front and to solve a lot of the problems that are going to come on the back end. So
yeah,
I mean, a case a lot of times in any type, whether you're dealing with data or a custom web application or anything, all these things run across and are applicable across business units within the company. So
yeah, none of this is like new or revolutionary. I guess the big point is you can apply it to data science too.
And we see that sometimes where Agile is stuck in the IT department.
Yeah,
that doesn't necessarily mean that your finance department or whoever else can't practice certain things. I think that's really clear, and we'll continue to see that spread across organizations going.
We're doing marketing tomorrow, right, Rick? Like a bunch of people in marketing.
We need to do marketing. We need to do hardware design. We need to do all kinds of cool things with Agile. It's true. There's a great question.
I'm sorry. Read the question, then I'll go next.
Yeah, there was a question in the chat. What about data across systems that don't match up? Separate project to reconcile those? That's a great question. Yeah. Well, first off, I think that's all the more reason to have a real cross-functional team. Because if there are two different systems that don't match up, you've probably got two different groups that manage and administer and work with those data, right? And so if you were going to do something that worked across those systems, you'd want to pull people from both sides together, possibly with a third resource, like a database type person or a data processing type person who could then manage the data that get pulled together. It's not necessarily a red flag for starting a separate project, because think about it. Being able to bridge those systems doesn't intrinsically have value to your customer necessarily. You want the project to be driven by customer value. It's just a different kind of challenge. So my advice would be keep the project unified, but bring in the right one or two people to make it happen. Create a combined cross-functional team. They'll learn a lot about each other's stuff, which is exciting for these folks. They love collaborating with people from other areas. They want to learn about the other tool. They want to learn how this stuff gets built, deployed, and worked with, right? So create that combined team and then drive forward would be my advice there. Not knowing anything in particular about it.
My experience is with legacy systems. Or one company acquires another company, acquires another company, acquires another company. And so you've got customer name is X over here, it's X plus 2, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so trying to get all those rules coalesced, it can be a nightmare.
It sure can. Genscape faced a lot of those problems. We grew through acquisition. And so it was actually 6 or 8 companies combined, and we had all that legacy going on. There are a number of really cool tools that your combined team might be able to leverage. The last one I did used GraphQL to create mappings across different fields, create a graph DB basically. And what that enabled us to do was create a shared metadata reference set. And then you can go in and say, I want the customer name from this source, but I want the customer age from that source or whatever. And it's a really nimble, lightweight, performant way of doing that. That's one solution that we used. I've also, that same company did a thing where we had a bunch of data in Oracle and we had a bunch of data in SQL and a bunch of data in Postgres. Right? Again, there are tools that you can use to navigate around and across these different situations. But getting the right people together and then empowering them to do the work is generally going to be your best bet.
Okay, but aggregating the data, you would still need to come up with a single solution.
Yeah, or something, right?
Thank you.
Some way of accessing the stuff.
Thank you.
That single solution could be a tool. Yeah, who knows? The engineers know. The smart people know. Who is this information targeted towards? Said differently, who within this hypothetical team can take this information and has the authority to employ it? That's a great question. So James asks a fantastic question. Part of what I'm doing here is starting a little bit of an insurgency. These are just ideas. They might be revolutionary ideas in your context. That's great. They might be ideas that you just need a little refresh on. That's also great. Usually it takes all of the above, right? You want management that understands how teams can work best to get things done and trusts their people to do the right thing when given the empowerment to do so. You also want a group of people who understand how to collaborate well and how to favor individuals and interactions over processes and tools, how to drive for customer value, how to behave in an agile way, right? And that's a journey. That's not necessarily a natural state that people arrive at automatically. It takes guidance, it takes practice, it takes discipline. So, you know, ultimately, I think, James, all of the above. But it has to start somewhere. And the good news is that you don't have to get all the way to a perfect place to realize value from some of these changes. It's also a more human way of working, I think. We are humans, not machines. So the more we bring kind of an agile mindset or some of these iterative agile approaches to things, the more the people around us will respond and appreciate it. That's my experience anyway.
Rick, do they have to have a data scientist on the team? And the reason why I ask is because prior to COVID, and quite a bit prior to COVID, one of my students reached out to me and he said, you know, the leadership team said that we needed to pick a data tool and implement it, and they didn't know where to start. Yeah, actually, that did happen. He said, can you help? And I said, well, I can't, but let me see if one of my team members can help. And luckily we did have a data scientist on board that could actually sit with the leadership team and the IT team and then come up with questions and pick the right tool. But my thought now is all my contacts from there have left due to COVID and they've gone elsewhere. But when they need now, like, what can a company do it without a data scientist if they have the right tools, or that data scientist is needed?
Great question.
Thank you. I thought it was going to sound really stupid because I don't really know a lot on this.
Yeah, so I've seen projects of this type work well without a data scientist. What they had was an analyst who knew how to build an algorithm or write some R code or M code, right? So you don't necessarily have to have a data scientist to do cool things with data. In my mind, when I'm working on a project like this, the person writing that algorithm or tweaking it or configuring it or whatever is effectively a data scientist, whether they call themselves that or not. There's also, of course, the quip that data scientist is what you call a statistician in California, right? So, you know, to some extent, anyone who works on this stuff is some kind of data science. So I'm hedging your question a little bit. I'm dodging it. Will the tool do it all for you? I think if you're really interested in being risky, yeah. Like if you really want to shoot the moon with very few resources and put your business critical projects and outputs in the hands of someone who doesn't necessarily know what they're doing, yeah, that's great. But it's also very, very risky. Right? It's like anything else. Would you let a tool run your Scrum team? Would you let a tool run your business? Why not, right? The same thing applies to data because it's risky. Those data might not mean what your tool thinks they mean. That tool might not scale the way you really need it to scale. The databases that are backing that tool might not play well in the long run. There's all kinds of issues that get raised there. Yeah, so Jason says here, he gets worried when product teams talk about the tools instead of the value or people. Yeah. Risky.
Anyone else have a question they want to drop in? Got a few minutes left here. I know Rick's brain is vast, so feel free to pick it.
It's fast because it's empty, Jay.
You said it, I didn't.
It's empty. There's an echo in there. Yeah, any counterexamples? Anybody had a really great experience running kind of a more traditional waterfall data science project? What enabled that to work well for you? What other tools or approaches do folks have to making these things tick? Yeah.
You're asking the question. I like that. That's good. Don't be scared, anyone. Hop in.
Yeah.
That's cool.
It's cool stuff. So you're welcome, Jim. Appreciate your coming. I'm gonna send this PowerPoint over to Jay and Anna, and I guess it'll land somewhere. I flicked through the slides on the recording already. So if folks need to go back and just scroll through the recording, they can see it there too.
Awesome. Now I think I have some clients that would like to see this, so I'm going to share it with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's rough.
And they love you. Everybody loves Rick, by the way.
You're welcome. You're welcome,
Namaste.
Veronica.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Rick, for your time. I always appreciate you.
Absolutely.
And we will be bringing, for those local to Louisville, we will be bringing back our networking happy hour probably within 45 to 60 days, Jay.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think maybe end of July is when we'll try to get together. Probably just be outside in Hirschborn somewhere.
As long as the cicadas are away.
Yep, we can't let the cicadas.
We're coming after the cicadas.
Anna has the full cicada outfit that she wears outside. I wish I was joking, but I'm not. So it's.
Oh, Rick, I'll send you a picture. I literally have like a coat, a hat, the whole 9 yards. Like I am like on cicada lockdown.
Yep. And those outside of the Ohio Valley, you probably have no clue. So this is actually turned into cicada meetup. So you never know with
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you soon. Thank you, Rick, as always. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Good luck, everyone.
Thank you.
See you.